So there are still some good people in the world. One should not assume that it is easy to be born as a human being and not easy to die. But there may be forms of birth in which birth is easy and death is also easy, and others in which birth may be difficult and death easy, like animals everywhere. This is because life exists by means of the elements, dhatu and khandhas in all cases. As soon as the breath stops, their continuity ceases, and this just means that a person or animal dies. What more can one say? Where can we find enough permanence and stability so that we can afford to be careless and self-forgetful, without thinking or learning enough about ourselves to act as good tendencies of character, sugati nisaya, to lead us into the future? The method of sitting in samadhi bhavana. We have discussed the method of walking cankama quite extensively, so now we will go on to explain the method of sitting in samadhi bhavana in enough detail to act as a basis for those who are beginning to train themselves. For whatever type of work one takes up, it is bound to have a set of rules and instructions as to how it should be done, and this is also the case in the practice of samadhi bhavana. It is taught that in doing the practice of samadhi bhavana, one should sit in the samadhi posture with one's legs crossed, as displayed in many Buddha images. The right leg should be placed on top of the left, and the hands placed in the lap, the right hand above the left, as in the samadhi posture. The body should be upright in a natural manner, neither bending forward nor backwards too much, nor should one incline to the right or left beyond what is normal and natural. No part of the body should be under abnormal pressure or tense, which would be using force and creating difficulties, for it should be relaxed in all its parts in a normal, natural manner. But when you start to do the meditation practice, please keep your interest and attention on the meditation practice alone. You should not be anxious whether you are maintaining the correct samadhi posture that you started off with, or whether it has changed in the meantime, leaning forwards or backwards, right or left too much. For all this would be concern for the body rather than for the citta, and the samadhi bhavana will not go smoothly. Therefore, once one has started to do the citta bhavana, one should have no further concern for the body, and one should set oneself to do the work of the citta from then on until one reaches the time for leaving the samadhi bhavana. When one first begins doing citta bhavana, one should establish awareness, which means the citta pays full attention to what one is doing, and this is what they call being in the present, vatsupanna Dhamma. This is the way that one can come to know clearly whatever happens to the citta and the mental objects of emotional attachment, Dhamma ramana, of various kinds, whether good or bad, when they change and alter just at that time, rather than at other times. This means establishing the citta with full attention to what one is doing with mindfulness, sati. Mindfulness means that the heart has a state of fully conscious knowing, and this is what reminds and keeps one mindful that now is the time when one is beginning to do this work. Please be careful not to let the citta fly away towards emotional attachments, aramana, of various kinds, either past or future, good or evil, which are far away from the present work of doing the beginning or preparatory stages of bhavana, parikamma bhavana. How to set up mindfulness right here and now. The nature of the citta is just to know. It has no ability in itself to make decisions, to think or investigate. It just knows thought, knows reasoned thinking, knows peace, and it just knows trouble and disturbances that come from contact with various things. That is all. But it has no ability to discriminate, nor does it know how to consider and decide what is right and wrong, or good and evil. In other words, it does not by itself know what is right and wrong, or good and evil. Therefore it has to rely upon mindfulness and wisdom, that which knows and that which assesses, considers, directs, and looks after it. For mindfulness and wisdom have power over the citta, and they are able to know about and see through the various emotional attachments, aramana, which the citta is thinking about. Therefore one should set up and establish mindfulness of the type which recollects and has power over that citta right before one, here and now. It will then do the duty of setting up knowledge and guarding the citta, not allowing it to slip away from the objective support of the bhavana and go to other things. If one can keep one's mindfulness in the present, guarding the chitta the whole time in this way while doing the Bhāvanā, one is sure to gain the asset of mindfulness with clear knowing, sati sampajanya, at that time or at some future time. In doing Bhāvanā with a preparatory method, parikamma, that is some aspect of Dhamma, one should do whichever type suits one's nature, and not something which goes against the grain. At that time, one should take up whatever aspect of Dhamma feels right and harmonious to one's heart, and go on doing it as one's parikamma Bhāvanā from then on, in the way that we have already explained. How to think the parikamma Bhāvanā. In making the preparatory meditation, parikamma Bhāvanā, as one's thinking, one may think of any aspect of Dhamma as it suits one, as we have mentioned above, such as repeating Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho, and then continue by fixing in mind one of these Dhammas with mindfulness. But if one takes any aspect of Dhamma apart from the above three, one should repeat and recollect these three, Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho, which are the three jewels, 3 times before starting with that aspect of Dhamma. From then on, one should gently turn to doing the preparatory aspect which one has decided upon, such as anapanasati, or atti, bones, or tacho, skin, for example. The various types of parikamma Bhāvanā which have been given to us to control the heart at that time, or at other times, act as a means of holding one's attention, aramana, for the heart to grasp hold of when one wants to become calm. For the nature of the heart is subtle, but it is not yet capable of depending on its own resources, which is due to the chitta still not belonging entirely to itself in a way that is complete and immaculate, like the Lord Buddha and the Arahants. So it is necessary to have a word which is an aspect of Dhamma to act as a parikamma to tie the heart down, or to act as an object of attachment for the heart at that time. In doing the parikamma Bhāvanā with any aspect of Dhamma, one should not speculate or imagine what results should arise from it at that time. One may, for example, imagine that calm having such and such characteristics will arise at that time, or that various nimittas will arise, or maybe that one will see heaven or hell in various grades or depths at that time. All such thoughts are just speculation or guesswork, and they only cause agitation and disturbance, preventing the heart from getting calm. There is no value at all in such imaginings, and they may make the heart feel like giving up the practice, or make it afraid to go on in various ways, all of which is contrary to the purpose of the right way of Bhāvanā as taught by the Lord. The right way is to set up the chitta with constant mindfulness here and now in the present, with the parikamma as the only object of attachment of the heart. This is done by getting the heart to be continually mindful of the parikamma word, such as Buddho, Buddho. This must go on all the time while being mindful and making the effort to feel or appreciate that parikamma, but do not let the chitta wander and become fascinated by other objects of attachment and go after them. The more the chitta, mindfulness, and the parikamma word support each other and become closely involved together, the more does it approach the aim and purpose of the Bhāvanā. The resulting calm and peace, or other things of a strange and unusual character which one has never met or seen before, will then appear as they accord with one's inherent tendencies of character. This will make one truly amazed at that time. They will arise on their own because of the power and influence of guarding the chitta continually with the parikamma word and mindfulness. There is nothing else that can conjure them up. Concerning the need to watch and be careful while doing Bhāvanā. There is, in general, a tendency for people to think and talk of Bhāvanā as being that in which one sees the heavens and hells, as well as the kamma and fortune of oneself and others. Those of you who are truly intent on Dhamma and its meaning for yourselves should consider this point, and look to see whether, during the time that you practice Bhāvanā, your chitta does have any lingering desire to become involved in these things or not. If it does, you should be careful not to give them any chance to arise. That is, if your intention in doing Bhāvanā is to gain calm and peace, and to see results in terms of happiness of heart, which is truly the right way. Because those things, the heavens, etc., are not good things, as is generally supposed, but they are thoughts that are beginning to go in the wrong direction. For the citta is that which is able to submit to thinking about acquiring various things which one likes, even though they may be false and illusory. It may then happen after a long time of submitting to such thoughts that they arise and appear to one as an image, seeming as if they were true and real. This state is difficult to correct and cure, for if a person has wanted to go in that direction and does so until those things which he understands to exist in that way appear to him, he believes that they are true and he feels glad about them. This then makes him more and more firmly attached to what he has been doing until there is no way for him to get free, and he is not likely to listen to any advice from anybody. I have brought this to the notice of you, the reader, so that you who intend to do the practice of Bhāvanā may know about it, and so that you should be aware and keep watch on your citta and not let it think about such things or submit to going in that direction. Otherwise, one may become a meditation practitioner who is a revolting and pitiable caricature, while still arrogantly maintaining that one's knowledge and experience is right and true, and at the same time teaching others to go in that same direction as one has oneself gone. If the citta has thought about and accepted something, even though that thing is quite wrong, it will believe that thing to be correct. Therefore, it is very difficult and disheartening and no small thing to correct such a state, because the citta is by nature very subtle, and it is hard to know, amongst all the objects and obsessions, aramana, which the citta has gone in for and got hooked onto, which of them are good and which evil. In fact, it is only possible for those who are extremely skilled in the ways of Bhāvanā, and who have gone through many and varied experiences so that they have gained a very wide understanding of them, such as Venerable Ajaan. Whenever anything went wrong with himself, and he had trouble in any way, whether externally or internally, he would unravel and look into the problem in detail until no room was left for any remaining doubt about it, which is why he was so rightly and appropriately called an acharya or teacher of the highest level in teaching Kammatthana Dhamma to his followers. Whenever anyone who had some knowledge and experience in Bhāvanā, both externally and internally, came to Venerable Ajaan and related his own story to him, we would all, as soon as he had finished, hear the Venerable Ajaan explain and display his own knowledge and experience as it was relevant, with concentrated intensity and certainty in a way that went straight to one's heart. What he said cleared up all doubts, both in the one who was talking to him and all the rest of us who had quietly gathered to listen. It also produced a great joy in the Dhamma that Venerable Ajaan taught, which was beyond description. If the questioner still had any doubts in any direction, once Venerable Ajaan had finished, he would then turn to these problems and explain his own knowledge, thought, and experience for Venerable Ajaan to consider once again. Venerable Ajaan would then point out immediately what were the reasons for those problems with the complete certainty of one who has already gone through them himself. He would often say to some of them such things as, "Why do you wallow about in piss and shit? I used to do this at one time long before you, and I washed myself clean of them with various cleansing agents for 3 days before I could get rid of the stink. But you are still energetically indulging in those things, wallowing in them from head to feet while believing that they are a pleasant perfume. Isn't that so? All of this is just a pile of shit and piss, 2 or 3 days old, which is radiating a pervasive stink, pungent and penetrating. Yet you are daring enough to make out that you can inhale it for fun. All the water in the well will hardly be enough to get rid of the stench from those things which you think smell so good. Don't say I haven't warned you. I have smelt these same things in the past, so I am afraid of them and make haste to warn you for fear that you will be induced into it again. If you have no water to wash it away, it may be even worse for you than it was for me. But even though I had water to wash with, it was still unpleasant, and I'm still afraid of it right up to the present day." When Venerable Ajaan spoke in this way, he used words which were most spirited and pithy, or so it seemed to the writer, who has a rather rough character. For people with more refined characters, they may seem distasteful and unpleasant to listen to, but what he told us in that way were words which have remained firmly entrenched and precise, concerning what is the wrong way and the right way which he himself had gone by in the past, and which he gave us who had come to learn from him to free ourselves from doubt and uncertainty in those things which we still thought of as right and good. It also made us try to follow him so that we would be quite sure that we would not be covered by a mass of piss and shit anymore, which is far worse than the words which he used to point it out to us and to make us listen, which some may think of as being coarse and vulgar. I have included a bit of Venerable Ajaan's Dhamma here, for all those of you who are training yourselves, for you to think about how this knowledge which comes by way of Bhāvanā is not final and complete in anyone who only insists on it being so, without having investigated it for themselves and checked it out, or having asked those who already know about it. The only exceptions are those who are already adept and fully developed, and they are not to be classed amongst those who see only the piss and shit and say how good it is, for the adepts have already disapproved of it, and they delight in their own knowledge and understanding. I also used to be proud of my insignificant cleverness, and used to argue with Venerable Ajaan forcibly until my eyes were red, so often I cannot remember how many times, for I was continually doing so. Knowledge used to arise in my mind all the time, and I always felt quite sure that I was completely right. But in arguing with him, every sentence which I thought was right and true became like a stick which I handed to Venerable Acharya for him to beat me over the head with until I hardly had any hair left. But then I used to gain skill, penetrating insights, and great benefits from these bamboo sprig questions which kill self, that I asked and thought were so right and good wherever they came from. This is how Venerable Ajaan taught me. But sometimes, after he had beaten me with skill, and of course this beating is not physical, he would give some soothing balm for me to put on my wounds. How else could I derive any benefit from my insignificant cleverness? In saying that Venerable Ajaan gave some balm for me to put on my own wounds, this means that he corrected my understanding and knowledge which had come from my Bhāvanā and which I had interpreted wrongly. I always accepted Venerable Ajaan's teaching, but before doing so and agreeing with his reasoning, I had to be hit until it hurt and I became afraid, which is what I call being beaten. I have included some of my own experiences here to show how those who have gone through it all and know the way are very different from other people who are still deluded and immersed in hordes of kilesas. If someone who does not know comes to cure those wrong views and understandings, and it is left up to just those who have some slick cleverness to do this, the situation is bound to turn into a verbal boxing ring in which nobody can reach any agreement and nobody else is likely to buy a ticket and go to listen to them, for fear that they may tread in the spittle of the contestants in their verbal boxing match, and slip up and slide into it themselves without getting any good results or benefit from it at all. The reason for this is because the internal knowledge derived from Bhāvanā is very changeable and complex, and it is difficult to decide what is right and what wrong. Those who do the practice without having a true teacher, Acharya, available to train and teach them, are bound to grope about in the dark, grabbing at what is right or wrong quite haphazardly. They grasp haphazardly at everything, and using the simile of a tree, they grasp the hardwood, the softwood, the branches, twigs, and leaves, and they build a house, a dwelling place for the chitta in the province of the heart, but without having first trimmed off the leaves, the twigs, and branches. Then they admire their work, thinking how elegant it is, even though other people cannot bear to look at it. The practice of Bhāvanā, which is other than insight wisdom with investigation, vicārana jnana, is just like this, for whatever happens will be entirely accepted as completely right, and then they talk about it, and it pours out of their mouths in a torrent for others to hear. But with their own ears so close to their mouths, they never listen to what they are saying, nor consider whether what they say is right or wrong. They just think that all of it is right and talk incessantly. The harm that comes from this not only stains themselves, who have not investigated, examined, and realized what is appropriate and what should not be said, but it also stains and distorts Buddhism, which is the focal point of it. Therefore, we should always be very watchful and careful about this. The right way to be thinking the word of the Parikamma Bhāvanā. Those who practice Bhāvanā should keep their attention and interest entirely on their Parikamma word while sitting in the practice of Parikamma Bhāvanā. They should not be concerned about the way they are sitting after they have initially set their sitting posture correctly, for while they are doing their meditation practice, defining and paying close attention to whatever practice they are doing, the body may lean forward or backwards, to the right or to the left to some extent, because at that time they have lost all interest in the body and their interest is entirely focused on the practice. So even if the body does lean a bit this way or that, the chitta should not lean away from the support, the arammana, of the bhavana. This is the right way to succeed well, because the goal which they are truly aiming for is to be found in the bhavana. But if the chitta is anxious about the body all the time, afraid that it is leaning this way or that, the attention of the chitta will be diverted from the Parikamma Bhāvanā word. Then it is not likely to become as subtle as it should, in accordance with the ability of each individual's chitta. They will then not be able to get the chitta to do its duty up to the maximum of which each individual is capable at that time. Therefore they should not be concerned with the body externally, but they should instead be attending closely to the bhavana word alone, until the chitta becomes calm and is able to know all the causes and results concerning oneself which are relevant to the main purpose of what one is doing. Furthermore, when the chitta becomes calm, concentrates together, and goes down into pavanga, where one reaches a state of complete rest without any sense of anything external such as the body, and then withdraws and rises out of it, and one sees that the body has leaned over this way or that in various positions, one should not feel any doubt or concern about the body not being straight and upright as one has set it up before starting. For concern about the body and about the heart will not only create disturbance for the chitta which does not yet know what its duty should be, but the results which one should get at that time will not appear, and all that one will be left with is trouble between the body and heart when one does bhavana without being aware of it. Therefore, one should keep this in mind from the time when one starts to do bhavana. Establishing the location and level of the arammana of the chitta. Some types of kammatthana, which are objects, arammana, of the chitta, have their own distinct location, such as hair of the head and of the body, nails, teeth. Each has its own particular location. But the location for skin is just those parts of it which are taken as the object, and one will know where they are located. One should realize that those objects which one defines do in fact exist, and they are the objects of kammatthana, each in its own place. These things, whether high up or low down in the body, each have their own invariable location. Thus, for example, teeth are located in the mouth, hair of the head is located on top of the head in a high location. Other parts, such as skin, hair of the body, sinews, and bones, are distributed throughout the body, and it is up to the one who practices to take up and decide upon one of the parts and where it is located as the object of kammatthana. When one has decided on one of the parts as the object and its location, which is high or low, or however it may be, one should take note of its location. But when one comes to define any one of the parts, such as those we have mentioned above, as the object while doing the bhavana, one should just define that part alone, and this is far more important than whether it is high or low, in the same way as the leaning of the body one way or another is not important when sitting in samadhi bhavana. So the level of the part, whether high or low, which we at first took note of, is now left to whatever it may be in its own nature, and one should not keep on bringing up those aspects of kammatthana which have already been clearly defined, because one thinks that they have altered from what they were originally. If one keeps bringing them up to re-establish them as the heart thinks they should be, it will just cause anxiety with regard to its location, and it is not a form of kammatthana which can be satisfactorily used to establish the bhavana. For example, if one decides to consider the bones of the skull, and one focuses one's attention on them as the object until one sees a clear image of them, as if one were looking at them with one's eyes, but then a thought arises that the skull bones have moved from their original high position and gone low down, which is not its true position. So one sets it up correctly and starts again. This builds up support for doubt and uncertainty in the heart all the time, and one never has enough time to examine that part of the body to become acquainted with it. The right way is to define that part of the body as feeling, or as a visualization of that part, with mindful awareness throughout. Even if the image of that part should change its characteristics, growing larger or smaller, or breaking up and disappearing, one should define it and know it however it may appear without any thought of it being higher or lower, which one determined at the beginning. Doing it this way will make the citta become intimately acquainted with that part of the body, and also cause a feeling of sorrow and disenchantment with this part which one examined, and which displayed its transient changing nature which was so forcefully apparent. Defining one's breath and that location where one establishes awareness of it is done in much the same way. When at first one fixes one's attention on the breath, one fixes it at a suitable location such as the tip of the nose, and after a while one becomes engrossed in watching the breath with interest, and then a doubt may arise, for the breath, or the place where it is being watched, may move away from the tip of the nose and go to some other location. So one brings it back and fixes it at the tip of the nose again, and this just creates a lot of trouble for oneself with one's own ideas, and it will never bring good results, because doubt gets hold of them and spoils everything. To go the right way about it, and to be free from all doubt and anxiety about the location where one should watch the breath, one should do the practice in much the same way as we have described above for the other parts of the body. In other words, one should know the whole breath, which passes by going in or out, quite clearly, with mindfulness present the whole time until it reaches the end point of the breath. Then, if the place where the breath is being felt should appear to be high or low, or different from the place which one thinks of as the starting point, it will not spoil the work of fixing one's attention on the breath in any way at all. In fact, it will make the citta and the breath become intimately close together throughout until the end of the Bhāvanā, or the end of the breath.